Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Rotoworld Football Show. I'm Patrick Daugherty, joined today by Denny Carter and Kyle Dvorchak. We're kind of a slow news week, but it's going to be a big drafting week. The NFL schedule is coming out Thursday evening. Actually, most of it's already leaked. You probably already know your team's schedule Thursday afternoon. They've done a really poor job keeping the lid on this one, but you know what knowing the schedule means for some reason? It means drafting totally different in best ball because the schedule is really, really important. And I feel like maybe they should lessen the importance of that. And I feel like they actually did do that, and then people complained about that. So
you've actually summarized it perfectly. That's what happened. That's how they reacted, and that's how Twitter reacted. That's like you did it. Good job.
So we're going to talk, though. So early ADP is out. We're going to go of the underdog ADP. That's where most of the drafts have been taking right now. And we're going to go through the underdog ADP and each identify a few risers and a few fallers, or people we expect will be rising and falling over the next 3 or 4 months. Some of them struck me as very obvious, but ADP is a very funny thing and has a way of not doing what you would expect. And it has a way of going, well, surely Kyle Pitts won't get steamed into the first round, right? For some unknown reason.
Please,
and then he does. So we're going to talk some risers and fallers real quick, talk some schedule talk. There are 6 Jets Island games this year, at least allegedly, reportedly. How big of a mistake is this? Denny Carter, go. Bury the Jets. I know you said you want to keep burying the Jets.
I want to pump the brakes. Look, I know there are a lot of Jets fans who, for some reason, like me, but are having a hard time liking me because all I do is crap on the Jets all day online.
Yeah, Denny was saying he wants to throttle off the Jets hate, and I say never.
But I will say that, man, we have potential here. For a meltdown in front of the nation, really. I mean, think of last year with the Broncos getting 6, 7, 8 primetime games. They were slittered across the entire schedule until the NFL could start yanking them away from those games and putting them back in the 1 and 4 o'clock slots. Anyway, I'm not saying it's going to be that bad. I don't think it'll be that bad, but the moody Aaron Rodgers on a new team. In front of the whole country, playing a pretty tough schedule. I mean, some of these games are not going to be pushovers. For the Jets. So I'm thinking that it could be fun for those who are not big fans of Aaron.
Kyle, before you, so far Rodgers with the Jets has kind of been that legendary internet meme where someone comments on their son's scowling Facebook profile face. A smile would be nice. And then the son comments, nothing to smile about in my life. That's kind of been Aaron Rodgers so far with the Jets. I feel like
I think the difference with the Russell Wilson situation and the Aaron Rodgers situation is that Russell Wilson was coming off of a down year. He was changing teams. That's always concerning. The team gave up a lot to get him. And he was going with a guy who we didn't know what it was going to look like with Nathaniel Hackett. And in New York. Okay, no. So every one of those things I named, in fact, is the exact same thing going on in New York, which is not good. I think it'll probably be fine because
Nathaniel Hackett also appearing in New York really is a bit heavy-handed.
It is
really real heavy-handed foreshadowing for this sequel. It has been a schedule release day meme of who's more likely to be the next Broncos. The Jets with 6 island games or the Packers with 6 island games, because apparently the Jordan Love-led Packers also have 6 island games because these United States of America just can't get enough of the Green Bay Packers.
So mathematically, I have to balance out my Jets hatred with Packers love. Did you know this? Where I find myself gravitating toward the cheeseheads. I am a cheesehead now.
Since 69, you've been a cheesehead, actually.
I've been rooting for him since Nam, and so I'm going to continue to do that now. And I'm Jordan Love's biggest fan. Please, Matt LaFleur, come through, baby, come through. Just one more win than the Jets, please. Just give us this.
Denny, Nam is where you developed your love of the Green Bay Packers. Some people in your battalion were from Wisconsin, correct?
Yeah. Yes, you read right.
They're big fans of Vince Lombardi, who was then the coach, and I'm sure heartily approved of the war, by the way.
That's so weird, though, that they had a coach who shared the same name as the trophy.
It is, Kyle.
And that there's a Lombardi calling plays in the NFL today. That must be a coincidence. Although we have talked about play calling is passed down through DNA.
Yeah, I'm sure there's no relation there whatsoever. Kyle, by the way, great bit on the scary similarities between Russell Wilson and Denver and Aaron Rodgers, right down to Nathaniel Hackett, huh? Just had to hire Nathaniel Hackett, did you? And Nathaniel Hackett then just had to grow like a Fu Manchu. Talk about I would never use this phrase earnestly, my man's, but my man's having a midlife crisis. Nathaniel Hackett, he's got like a
find this.
He's got like it's like more like a ragged goatee.
I'm looking at it now.
Very ragged goatee.
That's not good. That's not good.
My man's having a midlife.
This is
if I had to go through what he went through last year, I would have some regrettable facial hair as well, probably.
And our listeners may be having a midlife crisis at us not starting the show. So we're going to start the show. We're talking ADP potential risers and fallers as we scan the initial. It's not the initial. It's almost 2 months worth of data at this point. Correct me if I'm wrong, Kyle. A lot of drafting has been taking place. It's going to change now with the schedule being out because that is important in Underdog. But it's also just going to change because the narratives are going to change. The depth charts, as we know them, will change as camps, mandatory mini camp, and really, of course, training camp get going. But Kyle, who are two people right now that you think may rise, and what are their current ADPs on Underdog? The RB what, the wide receiver what, etc.
The first, Tony Pollard. He's the RB7, I believe. And did people not watch what happened last year? Where were you guys? The Cowboys, famously one of the most America's team. They get all the primetime games. They always play Thanksgiving. And Tony Pollard got a career high in carries. And I think the argument against Pollard was always oh, well, if you scale up his volume, he'll get less efficient, right? That's just how it works. You can't be the backup, be real great, and then step in. No, that's not true. Tony Pollard, in fact, is just incredible, right? He is just that good. The only thing I think that was really missing from his role, because he's not a massive dude, I'm fine with the guy taking some carries off his plate, was goal line work. They still gave that to Zeke. Zeke's gone. I don't think I'm putting this out there now. I may regret this by the time we log off. I don't think they're bringing Zeke back. I know they've kind of tiptoed around that idea. I don't.
Mike McCarthy may have been holding a framed photo of him and silently sobbing at the beginning of their press conference earlier this week, but I don't think he's coming back though.
But I think it's just, oh man, please don't do it. My heart can't handle that sort of heartbreak to have the rug yanked out from under us, just as we get last year. I believe an RB1 season, but not the explosive, this is where it all comes together season. That was hopefully the first of maybe a trilogy of incredible seasons, in which the second one is the best. He ranked second, Tony Pollard second in yards after contact per attempt, seventh in missed tackles forced per carry, and third in breakaway run rate. And that was on the expanded role. So I don't see how he doesn't end up settling in as a top 3 or 4 running back. I mean, the one out to him not settling in there is if Zeke comes back, which would be concerning, sure, but I don't think that's likely. And if we think we're getting this great role from him, we've already seen as carries go up for him, the efficiency didn't go down. He looks like you could tell me you have him ranked as the RB2. And frankly, I believe that. I think I'm going to have him ranked as my RB3. I know, Pat, you have him pretty high too.
I do.
So
so before we get
complete package.
Before we get to your next player, these are very initial rankings. I do have him as the RB3. He basically arrived as the perfectly fully realized version of Austin Eckler last year. And it's weird. It seems like a backfield that's ripe for something really random to happen. Or maybe it's not even Zeke. Maybe it's a different veteran who comes in to act like it's kind of an early down hammer. Or maybe just Malik Davis gets a lot more carries than we expect. Maybe Ronald Jones becomes the latest bloomer of all and becomes the early down complement. But I do take heart for Tony Pollard that the biggest investment they made in their backfield was Deuce Vaughn, who's a smaller Tony Pollard. He's the tinier version of Tony Pollard, a Tony Pollard clone. Mm-hmm. Calling him a Tony Pollard clone is not accurate, but he profiles as a change of pace back in the NFL and not someone that's going to get in his way on early downs, and that there is room to grow for Tony Pollard, where even if he doesn't get over 200 carries, which I think he almost got to 200 carries last year. He did 193. He could become like Austin Eckler, where the carries stay the same but increase in importance, and he is the goal line back. He adds those touchdowns to his receptions. He adds those touchdowns to his long runs. And I'm shocked that Tony Pollard is not getting more steam in the sharp best ball community so far.
The one name that jumps out when you're looking at underdog ADP right now, Pollard is going after Nick Chubb. I don't understand
Nick
that.
Chubb's really good. He's like Tony Pollard scores fantasy points. Nick Chubb is maybe he's as good of a real life running back, but we're playing the game. We're trying to score fantasy points, and that is so much more likely to happen with Pollard, who we know without a doubt like is a baseline really good pass catcher. And I think like Rotopat said, he could have that Austin Eckler level role, whereas like Chubb maybe is a bit of an underrated pass catcher. Without Kareem Hunt in town, I could see him getting more receiving volume, but not in the way that we see with Pollard.
Yeah, I mean, look, we are legally required as fantasy football analysts to call Nick Chubb the game's best pure rusher. Best pure rusher. That's what he's called, folks. So, yeah, I'm not taking away anything, but unless he gets a lot more targets and receptions, he's not going to outscore Tony Pollard. So that jumps out. I mean, so like Jonathan Taylor is going before Pollard. So you guys are putting Pollard over Taylor.
I think Taylor and Nick Chubb are very, very similar profiles, and it's a profile that I'm going to bet Pollard versus that type of guy.
Okay. I think Taylor might steam up as the season goes on, as the summer goes on, because I think people are going to start hyping the Colts offense. Like the second Anthony Richardson has one good practice, people are like, oh, the rushing lanes, he's going to open for Jonathan Taylor. You know, Jonathan Taylor, in his defense, did have an everything went wrong campaign last year. Like, things can truly only go up for Jonathan Taylor, who, when he's healthy, is the biggest big play threat in the league.
He's the best pure rusher, as we'd say. Derrick Henry, the best pure rusher.
No, he's the best breakaway rusher for sure. And I think Taylor, because of the big plays, is someone drafters will talk themselves into. Whereas Nick Chubb, anytime you're on the clock, Nick Chubb is the kind of guy you talk yourself out of.
Yeah.
Tony Pollard is the kind of guy you talk yourself into. So yeah, Tony Pollard is not going to remain behind Nick Chubb.
All right, my second guy, Keenan Allen, wide receiver 25. Like another one where like I just don't get it. Like what he's really good. Two, last year, I mean, what was it? It was a hamstring injury, I think, that just did not go away. We thought he was coming back. He never came back. We really only saw a healthy Keenan Allen for weeks 11 through 17. He was really good in that stretch. He averaged 84 yards a game, 7.5 catches on a full 17-game season. That's 128 catches for 1,400 yards, like career numbers and elite, like wide receiver one numbers. And that, I mean, that's the most recent version of him we saw. He was also almost his most efficient self we saw. It was his highest yards per route run and his highest yards per target since 2018. There was nothing except an injury. Like, no efficiency metrics, no volume metrics, no pure fantasy production that would say you don't want him next year outside of that first half of the season, which he was injured for. But like it's football. Everyone gets injured. That's just part of the game. And it's not something like, it's obviously not something that I expect to move into the next year. He killed it in the second half of the season. And he goes behind Mike Williams, who like famously a not really good stylistic fit for Justin Herbert. Like, bored with Keenan Allen because he's been so good for so long that like we're just like whatever, lump him in. It's like the Tyler Lockett thing, Brandon Cooks, just lump him in with these wide receiver 18, 19 guys. But the second half of the year, he was like a clear wide receiver one, and the offense should be better now that they're not going to be just completely dumping off every single pass to Austin Eckler and depressing Keenan Allen's ADOT. Like, I think moving the ball farther downfield, given how low Justin Herbert's ADOT, nearly bottom of the league last year, moving the ball further downfield isn't moving it away from Keenan Allen. It's moving it more to the receivers. So I'm even not worried about that. I think the offense is going to unstagnate and Keenan Allen's going to remain elite.
I think you hit on it when you said Keenan Allen's boring. He's just boring. You know, I mean, he's a slow slot guy. He sits down in zone coverage and he gets pelted with 13 targets a game. And so you know what you're getting, but he's not, he's not out there like, what do the kids say? Mossing people downfield. Okay. That's something he's never done. He will not do, but he's, especially PPR wise, he's a monster. So I agree with you that he should rise, but man, I don't know if he will.
Didn't someone take a 5'9" corner in the first round, Kyle? He might moss that guy.
Oh, Washington did.
Right, I assume Emmanuel Forbes. Yeah, you're talking about. He's really good.
Maybe he'll moss that guy. I think Keenan Allen's he's like a no-brainer riser too. because Quentin Johnson arrives. Whose game does he cannibalize? No secret. It's Mike Williams, not Keenan Allen. And when it comes to injury histories, who's one of the only receivers with more concerning injury history than Keenan Allen? Mr. Michael Williams, whose back just goes out because every single time Mike Williams jumps, he insists on landing directly on his back.
Some guys don't know how to fall, and we see this over and over and over again. And some guys do know how to fall. You know who knows how to fall? Justin Jefferson. That guy knows how to fall. He cannot get hurt because he falls beautifully and gracefully. I've always wanted to say this on a podcast. You know who is the worst faller of all time? I know we're talking about risers and fallers. Okay. Worst faller of all time is in the NBA. It's Zion.
Zion Williamson. Because
this guy,
Zion's body doesn't make gravitational sense.
He doesn't even try to catch himself. He gets up in the air, someone takes out his leg, and he just goes down like a sack of bricks, and with no effort to try to guard himself. It's incredible.
Some guy, Byron Buxton, famous for not knowing how to fall in Major League Baseball and just running directly into the center field wall every time he tries to make a catch. He's one of the best outfielders, of the century, and they had to make him a DH because he could not just stop plowing directly into the wall. And the final point on Keenan Allen, too. Who does Justin Herbert love throwing to all the time, no matter what? And the coaches have said in the past he threw to him too much and relied on him as a crutch, and then just continued to do that after they cemented his hamstring last year. It's Keenan Allen. He just cannot stop throwing to Keenan Allen, and it's just too low, wide receiver 25. Another guy you look for reasons not to draft, but I think he's going to settle much more in like the 18 to 22 range.
So I don't think that Keenan Allen should be going after Drake London. I could be just simply based on volume. I like Drake London as a prospect. I like him, what he did last year. Everything points to him being efficient and good. Okay. I'm not saying that, but I mean, it's Arthur Smith's offense. There's no hope for pass volume there. And there's lots of hope for that kind of volume in the Chargers offense.
Denny, who is your first ADP riser, and why is it Christian Watson at wide receiver 21?
It is, Christian Watson is at wide receiver 21, which is a little higher than I thought he was. But I still do think that he could inch up as we see, training camp reports, maybe preseason action, where it looks like he's cementing himself as an alpha receiver in an offense that, I mean, probably won't have a lot of target competition. And I say this about 3 or 4 days after the Athletics' Matt Schneidman said that Romeo Doubs will lead the Packers in receptions this year. Okay. Now, we're not taking that as gospel, but it is worth noting. So I actually looked at the final month of the season when Doubs and Christian Watson were finally healthy together on the field. And it's not great for Doubs, and it's actually pretty good for Christian Watson. During that month, Doubs earned a 15% target share to Watson's 21%. Watson led Green Bay with a 33% air yard share, while Doubs only saw a 13% air yard share. It wasn't close. And so I think that it will dawn on fantasy managers that like Christian Watson is going to dominate opportunity here, and he should be drafted further up. I'm not saying, top 10 or anything, but I could see him going wide receiver 16, 17 in that range.
Kyle, before you jump in, I mean, he's going to dominate opportunity, and he just dominated his opportunities as a rookie. Like the stuff he did on the targets he drew was crazy. Just basically like a born playmaker. He was old for a rookie, so maybe more of a finished product, even though he's coming out of a smaller school. Correct me, North Dakota State. I couldn't remember where he came out of. But a guy, when they do that as a rookie, like you take notice. And it wasn't just like commanding looks. It was making big plays with them. Kind of like basically what we wanted from George Pickens' rookie season. And the stats really aren't that different. But I thought Christian Watson was kind of like what we were hoping for out of George Pickens as a rookie. And now, knock on wood, finally having a healthy offseason, having an offseason knowing he's at the top of the depth chart. I think it's just going to be a totally different year for Christian Watson, and just the big playability that just never doesn't sell in fantasy. And even in the sharp drafters, I just think there's no way he's going to be outside the top 20. I have him ranked inside the top 20. I believe like wide receiver 18. Kyle, what do you think with Christian Watson?
He's really good at football. I'll give that to you. And tomorrow as of the day we're recording this, is his birthday. So happy birthday, Christian. Yeah, my only concern is that he's like not this. I don't know if he profiles as this massive target earner, but I will say like Romeo Doubs really wasn't that guy either, and he's not moving the ball downfield. It's like you should want to move your offense through Christian Watson. I think like the best usage, like optimism case for him is kind of what we saw with like the peak of Deshaun Jackson, where like maybe you don't want Deshaun Jackson as your number one receiver, as we saw later in his career. Don't give that guy too many targets. He'll explode. But he's so efficient that even if like half of the targets you throw to him go uncaught, the other half are just auto first downs. Anytime you get the ball in this guy's hands, like it is so efficient to have it there that you're sort of willing to play a higher variant style just to get him the ball. Like Jordan Love's got a big arm. He'd be like a good fit to play like YOLO ball, Jameis Winston it was Jameis to Mike Evans. Watson really isn't Mike Evans, but he does have that downfield ability. So I do think I'm not sure if he'll rise, though, because I do think fantasy analysis is so centered on volume. I think there are reasons to doubt he's like a high volume player, but he's really good. And he does fit the bill of guys you want to draft. Like you should want to draft Christian Watson.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Kyle. Can I just real quick interrupt? Can I real quick read you the players, the receivers who had a higher yards per route run over the second half of the season than Watson? Justin Jefferson, Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams. Those are the three guys who were higher.
Those guys good? Are they good?
They are. They at least two of those guys are pretty good. Pretty good. So no, I'm kidding. I mean, yeah, so it was elite in the second half of the season.
Then he just did that's the list meme on the podcast. If you're not on Twitter, that's quite a meme. Denny, who is your second player you expect to rise up the ADP ranks this summer?
Yeah, I think Jahmyr Gibbs is probably the most screaming value in best ball drafts right now. You can get him
the complete opposite take that I will give after you're done talking.
Okay, you confused me for a second. Yes, I do think that Gibbs will inch up the draft board as people get excited about him, both in training camp and maybe even in the preseason. I understand that David Montgomery is there and that the Lions are paying David Montgomery not insignificant money to take over that quote unquote Jamal Williams role in Detroit. And I know that's going to be annoying, okay, for Jahmyr Gibbs truthers. And as much as I don't like the actual NFL draft pick of Jahmyr Gibbs, I think that tells us that the Lions are going to be way more committed to getting the ball in his hands than they ever were with their space back from last year and the year before, DeAndre Swift. I think that everything speaks to him kind of being force fed through the pass game. Dan Campbell said Gibbs reminds him a lot of Alvin Kamara, which I believe I mentioned that a few weeks ago. And so I do think that people are going to get super excited about the rookie eventually.
It is always the best laid plans with a space back, of course, though. And we know those come to ruin. So for like teams draft a guy, like, oh man, we're gonna line him up all over. Like this guy's gonna be playing some fullback, some H back even. And then they get one padded practice, and like, oh my God, this guy's never played NFL football before. And he can't do any of this stuff that we thought, even though he's a first round pick. And I don't know if that's I think what's gonna happen is like Dan Campbell, mandatory mini camp is gonna be like David Montgomery, Jahmyr Gibbs. So selection had nothing to do with David Montgomery. We love David Montgomery still inside the 20. David Montgomery can catch passes. He's not going to even come off the field on every third down. I think there's going to be a lot of DeMont praise from Dan Campbell. I just think – I'm not saying it's going to be right. I do think people will get scared off Jahmyr Gibbs. And I think it'll have something to do with just like the real life draft capital, which like you said, doesn't actually matter, Denny. You don't have to like what the decision they made at number 12. But it's just hard a lot of times for people to shake those negative connotations. And I kind of think Jahmyr Gibbs is already at like the height of his hype cycle, and that his ADP will creep down a little bit as the summer. Because another thing, there are just so many running backs behind him that I think are like primed to rise. Yeah. Like Kenneth Walker could be at a low ebb. Aaron Jones is probably at a low ebb. J.K. Dobbins is probably at a low ebb. I mean, if Dalvin Cook gets a new team, I think Pacheco is going to steam. I think there's a lot of people who are going to be rising, and that he might be one of the victims.
Those guys aren't going over Gibbs. They're not going to rise to the expense of Gibbs. I mean, He's like elite receiving profile running back, extremely efficient running back. Team spends way too much on him, but that tells us, like we said, we're just playing the game. That tells us how much they like him. And do you see these Lions staffers, whenever they make a pick, they're not just doing their job. They're the happiest people who ever lived whenever they make a pick. Like, they are getting this guy the ball, and it's probably going to be in the ways that are like most efficient for fantasy points, where like he could be an elite weapon in the red zone. We know he was one of the best pass catching backs in college football last year. I believe he was third in yards per route run among Power 5 backs and something like fifth or sixth in receiving yards. Like, he doesn't quite have like 3-down profile, but I think he has like Pollard or, Alvin Kamara at his peak profile. He's a little smaller than those guys, is kind of the one caveat. I would say that if they spend the 12th round pick or 12th overall pick, they're not particularly concerned with that size. So I'm going to say
never concerned at first. I would say the best laid plans have ways of going sideways with these. When was the last time like a change of pace back just like hit the ground running as an NFL rookie? Like, it just doesn't happen very often.
I just think about that.
It's like a narrow role, and like they're just always less ready than they expect to like pass protect. And like, how are you going to be on third down if you're not ready to pass protect? And I just feel like it's a role that like busts so frequently as a rookie.
It is a little. It's volatile. I will give you that. Yeah.
Man, we'll just see. But I mean, I don't know. He's the number 12 overall pick, and people are already more excited than I thought they'd. I thought people would be truthing Jahmyr Gibbs a little more than they already were in their draft. So it is interesting that he's already so high. Yeah. I got 2 players that I think are going to rise in summer ADP. Very first, I can't believe Isiah Pacheco is the RB23. Like, what am I missing here? Like, the guy who closed out his rookie year so strong was starting to catch passes, kind of usurping Jerick McKinnon occasionally down the stretch for the biggest games of the year for the Chiefs. Like, a guy we liked as a rookie who not only delivered on expectations, but like way over-delivered on them. He's now like the unquestioned lead back for one of the very best offenses in the NFL. And I'm just been shocked to see his initial ADP hovering around the RB2-3 borderline. And what do you folks think?
Well, I think it has to do with his lack of passing game involvement, and
at least in theory.
Yeah, and that would change everything. It would change everything. We talked. I don't know, what was it, Monday, or I can't keep track of the podcast, but about how much the Chiefs throw it in the red zone, and particularly inside the 10-yard line. And that speaks well to whoever is catching the passes out of the backfield. Now, usually that's been CEH or McKinnon, depending on health and whatnot. If Pacheco takes on that role, or even chips away at that role, we are talking a whole different scenario. But I don't know. I mean, I think you're kind of relying on an early down banger and an offense that never runs it. That's how I see it.
So the only stat that matters is those passes inside the 10-yard line, Denny, and he occasionally was taking third down snaps away from Jerick McKinnon. That's all I needed. That, to me, that was a trend, and like that's going to be sticky. He's just going to take. They did wait like 3 months to re-sign Jerick McKinnon. I think that was some salary cap machinations there, where that was kind of just like he was always coming back, but they had to wait to a certain date to do it.
I think so.
But I just think he's going to be someone that people are going to talk themselves into. They talked themselves into him last year. You remember he was like basically 100% drafted last year.
Yeah.
When his role was so much less defined. Now he has a defined role with room to grow. What do you think, Kyle?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think the pass catching stuff is really going to be tough, because I was trying to remember who said it was you, Denny, that just like the Chiefs, like highest pass rate in the red zone, highest pass rate the closer you get to the goal line. Like that, like it makes sense. They have great short area pass catchers, and they have Patrick Mahomes. Like, why would you do anything different? The formula works. Don't change it. So they're going to pass a ton normally. Then they're going to get close to scoring, and they're going to pass. And if they are passing, it's probably Jerick McKinnon. Like Pacheco, I mean, he had 14 targets as a rookie, and he got 170 carries. It wasn't like he didn't play at all. He just did not get targets. That's not how he was used.
Might I remind you that he had 6 in the AFC Championship game?
Thank you for that reminder.
A sample size of 1.
That if that continues, that changes the calculus for sure.
The game done changed. Sorry, Kyle.
And Jerick McKinnon's a really good pass catcher. So I think those things will probably hold him back, both as a fantasy player, but also from rising. I think it's kind of very facially obvious that there's a pretty big hurdle for him to clear, which is being a between the 20s, not inside the 20s, pure 2-down player.
I will say real quick on Isiah Pacheco, it was only 14 targets, but he drew at least 2 targets in 4 of his final 6 games. He was getting more involved. So those targets predominantly came in December, where there was a point where they did get more comfortable with him in the passing game. And there were several times where Tony Romo was like, "Oh, they're leaving him in, Jim. They like the third down. I don't know." And then Jerick McKinnon scored a receiving touchdown. But it did seem like their confidence in him grew as the year went on.
That was a good Romo impression.
Oh, there you go. That Romo.
It's my favorite impression I've ever seen on this show.
Yeah, that wasn't Romo. Yeah, no, it was.
I do love the meme. I love the Romo meme.
I've been wondering if I created that meme. I've seen that out there, and I was definitely on the vanguard of that. But I don't think
you were. But the media is once again not giving you credit. I'm sorry.
I think it's this hubris that I think I was one of the people that created it. So yeah, we'll see what happens with Isiah Pacheco. Devon Achane is the RB35. I feel like there's absolutely zero chance that remains the case. And maybe this is just fear about Dalvin Cook arriving in Miami, which some people are presenting almost like as an inevitability. But I don't know, Jim. They went crazy. They had almost no draft capital whatsoever. I think they had 4 draft picks, and they used one of them on Devon Achane. He seemed like it was like a pound the table type player from Mike McDaniel, someone that just fell in love with and desperately need more playmaking juice out of the backfield. They did it just comprehensively, did not have it with Jeff Wilson, Raheem Mostert, Myles Gaskin, et cetera, last year. They love the player. It's a high-octane offense. It could be a very fantasy-friendly role. Like Devon Achane barely going as an RB3. I don't see that. With the Dalvin Cook is the huge variable, but if that trade doesn't happen, I mean, I think Devon Achane could be around like the RB2-3 borderline instead of the RB3-4 borderline.
Yes, but man, if that trade happens, Achane is
then RB35 is disastrously high.
He's a bench stash, folks. At that point,
I'm not sure we're seeing that trade. I feel like it probably would have been a spot where they pull the trigger before the draft because they don't want to have to draft a running back going into it, or shortly after if they think they struck out at running back. Maybe that's still the possibility, but I don't think they did. Achane is a good running back who is a perfect schematic fit for this team. Did I already say at some point previously on a podcast that he's breaking an 80-yard touchdown in the preseason and getting the Amir Abdullah steam? I may have already said that, or maybe I just make that reference every year to everyone.
You've been saying it to yourself in the mirror.
But yeah, he's a riser, dude. He's going to make some long preseason play. More like of the casual people are going to find out about this guy because he's not Bijan, he's not Jahmyr Gibbs, but he's really good and it's a great fit. This is a riser I can get on board with.
Yeah, I'm shocked at how low he is. Maybe there's more casual people in the underdog lobby this year too. Underdog has been getting a lot of attention. People like us talk about it nonstop.
Yeah. I've never turned on my TV and not seen Josh Norris's face.
No,
so that is one thing.
Josh, we want royalty. We made you. We want royalties. No, Josh.
I should say I see Josh Norris's handsome face and it's just staring at me through the TV all the time.
Josh,
it's the background on my phone. I'm not sure if that's like an ad placement that shows up. I don't think I set that, but it's there.
Josh, of course, the founder of this podcast and absolutely killing it at Rotoworld, at Underdog, as is Hayden Winks. We'll be right back after this. There really is no offseason in the NFL. Now that the draft is in the rear view, it is time to get ready for the upcoming season. Tune into Peacock, the NFL Network, or NFL Plus tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern and prepare to circle your favorite matchups and weeks this fall as the NFL reveals its 2023 schedule. And don't forget, download the Rotoworld app to receive breaking player news all season long. Stay ahead of the competition by favoriting players on your roster. Get the latest injury updates, player news, and much more delivered right to your phone. It's available in your app store today. If you're listening on the podcast, you didn't hear me botch the promo, but it's because I didn't read it before I had to read it live on air, and that's always a huge problem.
Kyle and I yelled at him for 13 minutes.
Always read your promos before the show starts, and I didn't do that, so I failed our YouTube viewers. And I don't know, Jim. I didn't read it.
Hey, look, you can't just bring out the Romo impression every time you screw up.
This is after Tony Romo
totally can bring it out every time. I love this.
Tony Romo totally botches a tequila ad read. And anyway, so we first half of the show we were we are positive with ADP risers, people we think are going to rise from their current their average draft position, as the Zoomers call it. But now we're on to fall. Now we're on to fallers. We're each going to identify 2 players we think might already be at the peak of their ADP value, and we'll be tumbling down the board as the summer goes on. Denny, who is the first such player for you?
Ken Walker. You may have heard of him. He was underdrafted last year, but now not so much. He's going as on Underdog. He's going as the wide receiver, running back 15, just behind the aforementioned Jahmyr Gibbs and then Najee Harris. I don't think that this will last. I think that the Seahawks investing a pick in Zach Charbonnet out of UCLA is going to weigh on people's minds and sort of make them think twice about whether Ken Walker can get there for fantasy on a consistent basis while splitting backfield duties and most importantly, perhaps losing out on pass catching opportunities. Just to reiterate, Ken Walker came into the league last year with a lot of question marks around his pass catching usage and ability. And he, confirmed everybody's worst fears. He's not very good at it. Ken Walker was graded by Pro Football Focus as last season's 40th best pass catching running back out of 50 qualifying backs. He had 27 catches for 165 yards, 165 yards last year. Ken Walker was 47th in yards per route run out of those 50 qualifying backs. So really, really bad. And Zach Charbonnet was solid, if not spectacular in college at catching the ball out of the backfield. So I think Ken Walker's going to deliver those big plays. He's going to deliver those 50, 60, 70-yard touchdown runs when he's healthy. But I think he's going to be very frustrated. I think people are going to wrap their heads around that eventually. We are going to see him fall in ADP, I think.
He's just a weird one because he's going to rise and fall based on probably absolutely nothing. Like, for all we know, his role will not change. But what we do know is that Pete Carroll will spend the entire summer talking up every single running back in this backfield. And he's basically will make Zach Charbonnet sound like a co-starter. Literally just today, this Thursday, he was talking up Kenny McIntosh, I believe the 7th round pick. He said they thought they had a 3rd round grade on Kenny McIntosh.
Stop it with these. We had this round grade on these guys.
I know. So Pete Carroll talking up everyone and their mother in the Seahawks backfield, that is not going to stop. That's going to have like a chilling effect on the Ken Walker market when, for all we know, he's just going to be deployed the exact same way. And like, why would he not be? He was so good in that role last year. Whereas to the Seahawks, they had real trouble filling that 3rd down role. Travis Homer couldn't stay healthy. DJ Dallas couldn't stay healthy. Travis Homer's now gone. They're going to need someone to catch passes and fill that role. Zach Charbonnet makes perfect sense on paper. But I do agree with Denny's premise, though, that Ken Walker is going to fall. That's good, too. There could be like injury whispers, like, can this guy actually stay healthy? They used such high draft capital in his new backup that I don't really think he should fall, but I do think he will fall. And I do think when I'm on the clock, I'm like, man, I just can't trust Pete Carroll, and I'll make a different decision.
Right. So I was going to ask if you were on the clock in a best ball draft right now, Pat, would you take Ken Walker or Aaron Jones?
Oh my Lord. I would take Ken Walker because I love big plays so much. Not that Aaron Jones doesn't provide those, but Aaron Jones is going on a few too many years of, well, surely Aaron Jones is going to finally explode as the pass catcher this year. And he's just like, he's like the ultimate. He is who he is. And it seems like we can't ever give that idea up. Where Ken Walker, especially in best ball, I think he can still like really shoot for the stars with him.
So what about J.K. Dobbins? Would you take him over Walker?
I actually would take J.K. Dobbins over Walker. And
what
about you, Kyle? I have Dobbins higher than average, I believe, in my rankings. So he might be one of the guys who's green when you go in and search for our outliers for me.
Yeah, I think I would also take J.K. Dobbins over him, and then I think I would not take Aaron Jones. I think I agree with you on both of those. Mostly, especially like Denny put in the context of best ball, but this is roughly true in season long too, is like, I want the guys who could absolutely like break football, even if it's just for a game, but maybe for a large stretch of games. And I think Aaron Jones is probably especially not that anymore with the Packers setup of not having Aaron Rodgers. That one little quirk in their offense this year, having the 4th-year quarterback who hasn't played a snap yet or whatever. That
one weird trick, as it's known.
And there's very much a chance that Ken Walker like just goes out and gets a ton of carries again and asserts himself as the team's RB1 because he's an elite big playmaker. I don't know if you guys remember this little player named Rashad Penny, but Pete Carroll hated him and he refused to play a guy who they invested a ton in and continued to give Chris Carson, who in his own right was a pretty good back, continue to give Chris Carson the work. So Pete Carroll is sort of like, you know, he's like Shanahan in that way where like they don't care about the capital. If you don't show well in camp, like it's not happening for you. And to have that potential on the table for someone like Ken Walker, where maybe he just continues to be an elite, heavy usage 2-down guy on an offense that's good, like it can also get him in the red zone. Like I want to be buying into that upside, even if I probably give up some floor that I would have gained with Aaron Jones.
Pete Carroll, it's not lip service, truly does not care about where you're drafted. He might be the only NFL coach who actually does not care. Didn't you have any more closing thoughts or any more either-ors to throw at us?
Well, just about Walker, like I actually would like the way I draft my teams. I would like Ken Walker to fall. I don't know, to RB.
Denny would like to draft a running back. Curious.
No. I'm just saying. I mean, I like some value. I'm a value hound.
If he makes it to RB, 45, 50, somewhere in that range, you'd consider taking him?
If he's going in the 16th, 17th round, you never know. I might get crazy. I might take him. No, I mean, if he falls like around the, I don't know, James Conner, David Montgomery range, I'm in.
Denny, infamous around town as an invertebrate value hound.
I will never take a value.
Denny, value hound. Denny, who is the second player who you think is primed to fall in average draft position this year?
I think James Cook is probably going to fall. Maybe
currently the RB29.
Yes, RB29. This is like the David Montgomery, Javonte Williams, Alvin Kamara range. Lots of question marks around this range. Charbonnet is right there as well. I do think that eventually we will have to come to grips with Damian Harris being there and being boring and
process that trauma.
Yeah, right. The processing is good for me. It's going to take a little while. I wrote glowingly of James Cook, I don't know, 3 months ago, and was really looking forward to him getting the opportunity. It's not happening. It's not going to happen. So we have to, when I say we, I mean me, I have to deal with that in my own way and realize that you cannot draft him where he's gone.
Kyle, what do you think of this Bills backfield situation? It is a really weird one where I feel like the Bills always want this one back. They always, like, it seems like there are weeks where they come out like, we're a one-back backfield finally. And then no matter what, they always revert to a 2 or 3 backfield. Damian Harris is a better early down option than they've had recently. Although Damian Harris did look like last year maybe a guy whose rookie contract was like the whole career for him, like someone who was looking less explosive than he did his first 2 or 3 years in the league. But Damian Harris is the RB38. James Cook's the RB29. What do you make of this dynamic in Buffalo?
Yeah, I feel like Denny, and I agree, like we saw a lot of like really high upside from James Cook last year. I feel like if Damian Harris is the reason that we're like, we can't draft James Cook anymore, we probably shouldn't have been drafting him in the first place because he's a free agent running back making, this has to be pretty close to the veteran minimum. It's 1 year, 1.8 mil. It's more than the veteran minimum, but it is not by much. So if James Cook is that good, but like you can't also have this guy is going to lose a lot of work to Damian Harris. Like maybe the argument is that it's the specific work, like the goal line work, but I'm not sure that's entirely why we were drafting James Cook anyways, because Josh Allen's the goal line back. It probably isn't even going to be Damian Harris. So I'm still fine buying into if you want to buy into the talent profile of James Cook, which is really interesting. He can be a really strong pass catcher, like big breakaway runner. Doesn't have to be the workhorse. Doesn't have to get 20 carries, 4 catches, right? He can do it on 15 to 3, 15 and 4. So I'm still fine buying into the profile, whether or not that reflects in his ADP. I kind of do think people just like the flashy young running backs, and he's on a good offense. So I could see him not falling as much, and just as a bet on talent, essentially.
So when I wrote that piece on James Cook, he was going as the running back 39, which I liked a little more than his running back 29 ADP. So let's work to get him back to 39, folks.
I don't know what is going to happen with James Cook's ADP because You guys both make compelling cases. There could be a, oh, crap, I did forget about Damian Harris moment for drafters. Or there could be, like Kyle described, we just love flashy young running backs and good offenses. And whereas
I feel like what's more likely to happen, that like we realize we overstepped and raised him too high, or we just keep buying in? Like, look, I was here for the Albert Akui-Bunam wars last year. At some point, I really knew I was in over my head. I was like, oh, I got really good values, right? Like at the end of the day, it's hard to predict what these players are going to do. But if everyone sort of agrees that this player is more valuable than when you drafted him a month ago, that's like a small win, right? That's closing line value and betting type of stuff. Do we ever pull back on our excitement without any like real new information? I'm assuming like the Bills aren't going to draft anyone, or we're not going to get like a horrific camp report on, oh, James Cook doesn't know the playbook. Assuming things hold roughly the same, do we ever have that coming to Jesus moment where like, we really should think about the value of this running back and the way the projections line up? Like when we get going, we get going. So I don't think he'll fall.
It's actually a really good point. And you have to give Denny real quick. I have this quick shout out to who did an amazing job on my taxes this year. Sorry, Denny.
Yeah, I want to say that because Kyle lost the Albert O wars, that's why he has Greg Dulcich spray painted on his mailbox.
Dulcich was a minor theater in the Albert O wars, like a side theater, where like the French and the British sent a few troops to skirmish in North America where their heart wasn't really in it. That was just a side theater in the greater Napoleonic Wars. Anybody else with me here?
Yeah, you've been reading too much.
I've been reading a lot lately.
We ain't reading all that.
No, you are not reading all that. By the way, real quick side thought on the Bills' backfield. Do either of you know what team Zach Moss is currently on? The Bills are a choice.
The Colts.
That would have been my guess. Did they keep him?
Oh, yeah, they did. I was hoping you guys wouldn't remember. He's on the Colts. Yeah.
I actually got myself worked up about him, like at some point in DFS.
I was going to say you asked the wrong people because we were jamming 4-string running back in a starting role in week 17, something like that.
That's how it works. Kyle, who is the first of two players you expect to fall in ADP as the summer goes on?
First of two is one more of a prediction of something that's going to happen that will drop his ADP. Dalvin Cook. I think there's a pretty reasonable chance he doesn't end up on this roster by the time we get to week 1. Like he's going right now, I believe, is the RB20, and it's already been trending slightly down. But until week 1, it's probably relatively unlikely that we ever find out what's going to happen. Like we're not going to find out in July that they're cutting him down the road. It's only going to be continued speculation of they are cutting him until the first snap he takes in a Vikings uniform, if he ends up taking that. So there's like mostly one direction to go. And I think like it probably makes a decent amount of sense to cut him. They've already been quite non-committal on him. We've already gotten rumors that like Miami was monitoring his trade value heading into the draft. Kwesi Adofo-Mensah was very non-committal in the way we sort of talk about like Joe Mixon and the Bengals coaching.
Kyle, not to interrupt your train, but we're getting some real serious. Dalvin Cook, yeah, I mean, last time I pulled up our roster on Wikipedia, he was still there.
That is got to be like a bit concerning for his standing with the team. And they did bring back, which I thought was kind of surprising, they brought back Alexander Mattison on a 2-year deal, and on a yearly basis, he's the like 21st highest paid running back, which isn't to say that he's elite, but that the team values him as like a low-end starter type. And if you have a low-end starter type and you drafted a running back, I really like the running back drafted, Dwayne McBride, who's just a potentially elite playmaker. He went pretty late in the draft, so I won't get too over my skis on him. But if they're paying a fringe starting level running back and they just drafted a running back and Dalvin Cook, they can save, I believe, $9 million by cutting him. I think there's a lot of where there's smoke, there's fire here. And it's not a guarantee that he gets cut, but I only see his ADP going one direction essentially until the final days of drafting when we're fairly sure he's playing if we get to that point.
That's a really good point, that his ADP could actually go up, but it would require him getting traded sooner because he's kind of in the ambivalent zone right now. Like we just don't know zone of RB20, because even though Dalvin Cook's declining, like if we knew for sure he was going to be on the Vikings this year, his ADP would not be RB20. It would still be probably borderline RB1. And there are places where he could get traded and become an RB1 again. but it's just that uncertainty is just going to be killing us all summer. Any thoughts on Dalvin Cook, Denny?
Yeah, draft him. I mean that's going to end up being a really good spot to get him, and you can only get him now when there is uncertainty swirling around him and where he's going to play, what role he's going to have. As soon as we get some clarity, it like that value is over. It's out the window. Like he's going to jump.
Denny, where would you rank him if he were on the Miami Dolphins today?
That's a good question. I guess I'd put him in the Ramondre Stevenson range.
Yeah, I guess that's fair. But what about our Devon Achane, our guy, man?
You mean if Cook is?
Yeah, I mean,
Cook goes to Miami.
He's a part-time player.
I will remember that name, Achane.
Well, it's true, and as we know, if there's anyone who knows how to make it work, it's a Kyle Shanahan disciple. We'll just keep featuring him to him and cannibalize the value.
Yeah,
and I mean, they also just give touches to Myles Gaskin for some reason. So
I think it matters how he gets there too, right? Like if a team does end up trading for him, I'm not entirely sure how likely that is with his contract. I think it's more likely he gets cut and signed. Probably still a decent deal for a player who just got cut. But like if he gets cut and goes to another team, like that tells us something about the value that the NFL assigned to him. If a team were to trade for him, even just like, a late round pick, essentially paying to take on the contract, that would mean a lot more than if he gets cut and goes to another team.
Who are we on? Denny, who's your second follower? Or is this Kyle? Kyle, who's your second follower?
Miles Sanders. This is another one where I don't have a strong read on where the market is going. I do think I understand how people will treat the Dalvin Cook situation and like Tony Pollard, players that we think are exciting and people want to be drafting. Miles Sanders is kind of somewhere in the middle. It's more so I'm just not sure I buy into him even close to where he's going as RB17.
He's the RB7. Okay, RB17, yep.
The Panthers last year were 22nd in PFF run blocking grade. They didn't make really any notable changes to their offensive line through the draft or free agency. Miles Sanders is not a pass catcher. He was dead last in yards per route run last year and really hasn't been good since 1 year early in his career as a pass catcher. Panthers are 7.5 win total, like below league average team. And last year, Chuba Hubbard was really good. 7th in rushing yards over expected per carry last year. It's like the most meh player I can find. And it's one where I think as we get hype on, I don't know if Achane would be like a guy to pass him, but guys that have reasons to move up, we find out they have a better standing within the team. Those guys are the players I expect, like your Pacheco types. Like if there's rumors that Pacheco could do some pass catching, he is a guy who I could see leapfrogging Miles Sanders. And I looked into this a few years ago, and players that running backs that change teams in free agency, even when they're paid well, generally just see fewer touches. That's just the nature of the position. As you start to age, once you hit that next contract level, even if it's a good next contract, it's really tough to keep up that volume.
Miles Sanders, RB17, has like really, really strong this time it counts vibes. I know that he was just in the most sophisticated rushing offense in the league for 2 years and did absolutely nothing. That's a stretch, but it just felt like that when you invested high draft capital in him. And then it's going to work for the rebuilding Carolina Panthers. I just can't wait for that to happen.
Look, Miles Sanders has a nightmarish receiving profile. I mean, really, really awful stuff. I'm not just talking about like raw stats. I'm talking about the stuff that matters, the peripheral stuff, yards per route run.
The juice, the goods, the sauce.
Yes, the goods say, woof, man, how can he be this bad at catching the ball? I have my hesitation there.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many guys behind him too that is he really going to stay ahead of J.K. Dobbins? Is he really going to stay?
That's a good example. Like, really, J.K. Dobbins is awesome.
Is he really even going to stay ahead of Dameon Pierce? Like, do we expect this to happen? Dameon Pierce was very good as a rookie. We like him.
He's really good. Yeah. I agree. They're like some flashy young players who are like in no different of a situation. Like, what's the difference between Dameon Pierce's situation? They're very similar. Both teams drafting their young quarterbacks of the future. Like, what is the difference between those two players other than Dameon Pierce is younger and was maybe better last year? He was really good at breaking tackles.
Straight up, Denny Carter, would you rather have Miles Sanders or DeAndre Swift? Not telling you their ADPs.
I know what I just said, but I'm going with Miles Sanders.
I agree with that. But I'm not in on the Swift. It's scary season for Swift.
No, Swift is. I mean, you want to talk about a guy where this time it counts.
It's
that's a real this time it counts. That's a big this time it counts.
It's never counted more than it does right now with DeAndre Swift. We're on my fallers now. Yeah. I'm just gonna start with JSN, as he's called. Jaxon Smith-Njigba. How do you say Njigba? How do you?
Right. I say it like the second one you said.
What was the second one?
Njigba.
Just going to say JSN for now.
The
wide receiver 29, he's going ahead of Tyler Lockett. I mean, I think this is like our annual Tyler Lockett derangement syndrome where we just refuse to accept and remember how good Tyler Lockett is. And we talk about the Seahawks being like a true meritocracy, like where your draft position doesn't matter. But like Pete Carroll loves Tyler Lockett. So I was going with that where Pete Carroll wouldn't hesitate to bench a veteran, I think, too. But like they just love Tyler Lockett. And why would they not? He was still extremely good last year. I think JSN, sorry if you've heard the spiel from me already on the podcast because I've made it a few times. I think JSN was someone they thought was a value that should not have been there. Someone who could be a succession plan to Tyler Lockett in the slot. And just someone who filled a huge need. Like you might think a team that had DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett didn't have a receiver need, but the Seahawks did not have a number 3 receiver last year. They just like straight up didn't have a number 3 receiver and really, really needed a third receiver. And you could argue whether or not they should have done that in the first round then, but it was an acute need. Tyler Lockett is aging, but just like Keenan Allen, he's aging, but there's no indication that he's falling out of his team's plans. And he's just a really good football. And I do think that drafters will realize this, and Tyler Lockett's ADP will go higher than JSN's. Or
you give the drafters too much credit. We do this every year. Where like people are always tweeting, Tyler Lockett's had 19,000-yard seasons in a row. How is he going this low? And the ADP bar is just a flat line. It never moves a muscle. When have we ever displayed restraint with a talented young rookie? Name me one time. We are a pack of wolves who just love the new thing. And especially when that new thing is good. JSN was an elite prospect. And it's an
for 1 year.
For 1 year. It was one of the best years ever.
One good year. So Denny was dying to get in there. Sorry, Denny.
No, it's fine.
Ahead, Denny.
But I have questions about where JSN fits into this passing game because the Seahawks were like bottom 12 or 13 in 3 wide receiver sets last year. Like,
hey, we called that top 20 or 2 or something.
Yeah, I mean, well, however you want to slice it, like they're not getting 3 receivers on the field all that often, and so and JSN is a slot only dude, like he's not going outside, so that leaves Metcalf and Lockett as every snap receivers, and it leaves JSN as I don't want to say rotational, but something like rotational in an offense that doesn't really want to throw it. Okay, they want to be very balanced, they want to be very careful. They saw what happens when you lean on Geno too much. So I do have questions, and Lockett should be, like we say every year, should be going well before JSN.
The only thing I could push back would have is the 3 receiver thing might have been it because again they didn't have a number 3 receiver.
When Dwayne Eskridge is your 3rd receiver, guess who's not playing a lot of 3 wide? They also have tight ends too.
They just didn't have anyone to throw out there. But then to Denny's point, Pete Carroll, seriously, like right before we started this podcast, was in an extended monologue about the importance of the running game. Like there was people live like doing threads that were like 8 or 9 tweets, and where he was really talking up that running game. And like Denny said, I think the Seahawks realize, I mean, even with as good as Geno Smith's season was, there are lots of points where it was bad, and especially in the second halves of games when they had like winning time, like they were wishing they had a stronger running game. I think they realized like that was a career year that is not going to be replicated for Geno Smith, and the volume is not there to support 3 receivers, and I just don't see JSN overtaking Tyler Lockett. So I
agree with all these things. I agree with all of these things. Do you guys genuinely believe the average drafter seeing 1,600 yard? I think JSN playing with Geno Smith, great year last year. Did he win comeback player of the year? I think whatever
he did.
Like they see that, and then they see Tyler Lockett. Oh, great! What do I get? 1,200 yards and 8 touchdowns.
The guy who I never ever win with, Tyler.
Yeah. Even though he's really good, I'm just saying this from trying to guess where ADP goes, right? Because I do think it's like important to try and get closing line value on your players. And also, like, if you're doing multiple drafts, if you can predict now where things are going to move, that's an advantage to have, right? You can get good values later and good values now if you know where things are going to move. Are these drafters really going to temper their expectations on JSN? I agree. The volume is a big concern. I do think he'll probably be limited to a part-ish time role because he's going to play a lot of slot mostly. Do the drafters care about these things?
Guys, I'm upset. I just looked through the wide receiver ADP on Underdog a little more thoroughly. And what in the world is going on with Lockett going behind JSN and Michael Pittman? No.
I'm telling you, Pittman's going to go higher, man. I'm telling you, the second Anthony Richardson puts on shorts and like a cutoff shirt and uncorks a few 70-yard passes, every Colts skill player is going to skyrocket.
Absolutely not. Michael Pittman, if Anthony Richardson truly does get the week one role and they say we're going with him no matter what, we're going with the kid, Pittman's out of my player pool completely. Like I don't care where he goes. I don't want him. I might take Alec Pierce like in the 25th round, but besides that, no. I'm out on all Colts pass catchers in that situation. Going before Lockett, that's wild to me. No.
I will never quote not have Tyler Lockett derangement syndrome.
Look at George Pickens is going right next to Lockett. That's insanity. That's what in the world? They should not be in the same galaxy ADP wise.
That is offensive. This happened with Lockett last year too because of Geno Smith fear, and
everyone wanted DK Metcalf because he's large and strong, and that's cool. Guys who are big and strong are cool, but like
George Pickens going before Brandon Cooks, Deontay Johnson, Treylon Burks, absolutely not. We have to right this wrong.
By the way, Tyler Lockett's like actually good Brandon Cooks because every year like, oh, Brandon Cooks ADP is way too low, and it's always perfectly fine. It turns out, whereas Tyler Lockett's is always actually too low, and it's actually too low again. Very final one, and we don't have to talk long about this one. Breece Hall is the RB10, and I just feel like people haven't it hasn't fully sunk in yet that he's coming back from a torn ACL. And the Jets have been like uniformly like his knee is better than it was before he shredded it. I mean, I think all of our players should tear their ACLs, to be honest, because they come back looking this great. Like that's where the Jets are at with Breece Hall's ACL. But like the second that he doesn't practice the first week of training camp, and like the second people remember J.K. Dobbins as a thing that exists and how long it took him to come back for his torn ACL. RB10 for a second-year ACL case is just absurd on its face. And I think people are going to realize, even though he's such a good player, like I do feel like that's just like absurd on its face.
I think it's fine. I'm willing to gamble on it, but I totally agree that like we're trying to read the market. We're going to sit him for the first week of training camp, RB13. Like that's the immediate jump that happens. And maybe it's really like not that predictive of whether he plays or not. But like in terms of reading the market, I do think you have a spot on read that like he's probably being drafted. What I think is fair, you think is his ceiling. But either way, I don't think there's a ton of room for it to grow. But there's one very obvious example of it shrinking, of him going just outside the top 12 running backs. The tiniest quote is all it'll take.
It really is. Exactly. It's taking like one talk. Like Robert Saleh's like 90. He's like looking at his Apple Watch, reading a text, and whatever. Breece Hall, he's not going to practice tomorrow, and like everyone just melts down. And
he's gonna drop.
You guys remember a certain player named Zonovan Knight? And that's who's going to lead this back.
Who is that? Never heard of him.
Jeez. I mean, let's cut it out.
Zonovan Knight, man, did he proved costly in a few season-long matchups, not going to lie.
He was good until he wasn't. Was the issue.
Quite costly for me in one or two leagues, but we're not here to talk about the past. We're on to Cincinnati. We're on to next week, where we might do a live best ball draft on air if we can, seeing if we've got everything in good working order. This is a little preview for next Thursday, but we might do a draft. We might just talk the news. We're definitely going to be here podcasting on Monday and Thursday. So for Denny Carter, for Kyle Dvorchak, I'm Patrick Daugherty. Thank you for listening. We will be back next week.